welcome to Podsauce, your podcast discovery show. I am Alicia Renee.
And I'm Dax Holt.
We have a guest today, and I really love the title of his podcast, but I also love the meat because as a music lover, here for it. As a woman who pivoted from pursuing law, I mention it all the time, Robert, that's why, that's the inside gag, to now hosting various shows and acting. I, too, believe in following my dreams. Host of Follow Your Dreams, Robert Miller. Welcome to Podsauce.
Hey,
Hi,
thanks
Robert.
for inviting me. Hey, so great to be here. Thank you so much.
I love it.
We feel good about it. We always like to ask our guests to give us the elevator pitch, so to speak, on your podcast, on what your podcast is about.
My podcast is all about trying to inspire and motivate people to follow their dreams, just as I followed my youthful music dream much later in life and succeeded. And I wanted to give people the benefit of trying to push them towards their dream, because I believe everybody's got a dream.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Robert, I was listening to your podcast. I listened to the episode with the Queen tribute band lead singer. And I loved the episode because you got into his life and how he pursued this dream of, he's not honestly, the lead singer of Queen, but he is impressing crowds out there, and it's just a fun story to listen to. What do you feel like is the episode that you would want to really push people to listen on your podcast?
Wow, that's so tough. I mean, I've done 80 some odd episodes in just the first year. And I've had a variety of people on the show, and a lot of musicians, a lot of famous musicians, but a lot of people that are just well-known or very successful in everything else that they do. My first guest was a guy named Cousin Brucey, who is a radio personality par excellence, as we say. This guy was the 1960s premier radio personality. He introduced the Beatles at Shea Stadium. What more do you want to know? I did Ted Nugent, the Motor City Madman. That was a fantastic episode. He was playing guitar the whole time. It was kind of like a master class and a concert and an interview rolled into one. So that was terrific. I also like to do things at times that, are more serious and carry a message. So I did an episode on a song that I had written called Tree of Life, and it's an anti-gun song. And I put that out right after another one of these terrible mass shootings that this country has been plagued by for so many years. So those are the kinds of episodes that I like the most.
Robert, it's often been said that music is the soundtrack to our lives. And I love that your podcast weaves in conversation as well as music. Was that intentional? Was it because you wanted to bring the feeling that music can emote to the interviews, or you just wanted to give something different?
Well, it was definitely that, but also I'm a musician. That's what I do first and foremost, and I wanted to reach people at a deeper and better level of engagement than I feel that you can basically do with the normal social media. That's one of the reasons I started the podcast. So in every episode, I take one of my songs and I make that the featured song in the episode, and I try to make the song relate somehow to my guest or the subject matter, and we play it underneath the introduction, then I play it again at the end. Sometimes I do special episodes that are just music focused, and a lot of times with all of my music guests, I do something that I call a song fest in the middle of each interview. And what that means is I ask them to pick out a handful of songs that they like, or that they were on, or that they are their favorites. And we talk about them, we play them, we have great fun. Nobody else does this in podcasts that I know of. And that's a wonderful way to integrate music into the podcast.
I agree.
Who would be your dream guest? Someone out there in music that maybe you've looked up to, or that you just really admire to be a guest on your podcast?
God, there are so many. I mean, look, I've done several podcast episodes on the Beatles because, when I came of age musically, they were still at the top of the mountain. So having somebody like McCartney on the podcast would be, like going to heaven. Billy Joel, guys like that I just admire so much. But I've been so lucky because so many of the guests that I've had on that are musical guests, they were my heroes when I was growing up. I mean, people like Mark Farner from Grand Funk Railroad, Felix Cavaliere from the Rascals, These are guys that, made their mark a while ago, but they've been at it. They continue to play, and they're just fabulous musicians and fabulous people.
What kind of feedback are you getting from your audience? Are they learning a lot from these interviews about these celebrities that they just never knew?
I hope so, because, I talk to these folks not as, some unknown person that's talking to a famous person. I talk to them as a musician and as a peer. And I want to have fun with them. I want them to come away feeling like they were treated well by me, but I also want to get at different aspects of their personalities that maybe people don't get in a traditional kind of interview. So, for example, I ask almost all of my guests, tell me about your dream when you were young,
Hmm.
because everybody starts out life with a dream. At least that's what my belief is. And I've had some fascinating answers. I had one lady on the show. She was an ex-advertising executive, and now she's running a CBD company. And when I asked her that question, she said, "Oh, that's simple. I wanted to be an Egyptologist." Okay. And she had an obelisk on her desk to show me,
Yeah.
okay, at that moment. She didn't know I was going to ask that question. And then the other thing I like to do, I throw shtick into all of my interviews because that's how I have fun with this stuff. So at that moment, as soon as she said something about, Egypt, I had to throw in Steve Martin's, Egypt song, if you remember that. And I also threw in Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
you got to have fun with these things, right?
Yeah, it's you know what isn't fun though sometimes pivoting into a different career path, right? Like follow your dreams is such a beautiful title for a podcast, but it can hold a lot of fear and trepidation for a lot of people. You pivoted into music in your 60s, I believe that's what your bio mentioned. What was it that gave you the courage to pivot and follow your dreams?
Well, I always wanted to be a rock star. That's the path that I thought I was on from the beginning. And like so many people, I think most people, life got in the way.
Yeah.
And, soon I was married, then I had a kid, then I had a mortgage, I had obligations, and I wasn't making enough money in music to support myself. So I had to go off in a different direction. But I swore to myself I was going to do whatever else I was going to do during the day, and I was going to play music at night. And guess what? I didn't do that for 15 years. I
Mm.
gave up music. And finally, when I was in my 40s, I started to get back into it, but it was still more like an avocation, more like a hobby. Finally, when I turned 60, I said, "Hey, I don't have too many more rodeos to go here, so I want to make sure that I don't regret never having tried." And you know what? It was the best thing I ever did. I jumped into the deep end of the pool,
Yeah.
and it's worked out so well. And so I felt like I needed to do this podcast to show people that you never want to get to any point in your life where you regret that you hadn't tried.
I,
That's the key.
I
I
think
love that.
yeah,
I
I
love
think the
that.
fact that you've reached number one on Billboard and you have millions, of streams, I think it definitely shows that it was well worth
Yeah, and
it.
Robert, have you heard from anyone else that said like listening to your podcast made me do a career change or change my trajectory and whatever life may throw at them?
Yep, I've heard from dozens of people that
Yeah.
told me that, I'm XYZ age and I always wanted to do such and such. I listened to your episode and now I'm doing it. And that
Wow,
makes me incredibly happy to be
Yeah.
able to influence people positively like that.
that's amazing.
I know it is, and but it also has to feel good. You know what I mean? To be able to, because oftentimes when we're on our own journeys and it has its ups and downs, and you make your own pivots. If it doesn't pan out well, sometimes it can be fearful for other people to want to also step out on some faith. It's always a beautiful story when there is gold at the end of the rainbow.
Well, I agree with you completely. What I say to people is if you take a look at, whatever your dream might be, and you say, I'm going to just make a complete wholesale change and go after it,
Yeah.
that's probably something that's going to be intimidating and frightening, like you
Yeah.
just said. So I believe very much in the idea of baby steps.
Yeah.
Okay. If I just said, okay, I want to be a musician, I want to be full time, I want to do this, I want to be, playing concerts all around the world, that would have scared me. But the first thing I did, I sat down when I made the decision to do this, and on a napkin, I literally wrote out like the first 5 steps I had to take. Okay. And I believe that if you do things in so far as a baby step approach is concerned, then things become so much more manageable and achievable.
Absolutely. Robert.
And also, there
sorry.
is no path that's a direct path. You
That's a
know, for me,
fact.
it was one step forward, two steps back, three steps
That's a
sideways.
fact.
You know, there were too many evenings I don't want to even remember where we basically gave a private concert to the bartender and the waitress, you know, as we were building up a following.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to get through those things, those hurdles, those you know, obstacles. You just have to press ahead. Never let anybody tell you you can't do it.
You know what I'll say to piggyback off of that, Robert? My mom always told me, she said, you know where your passion lies because that's the thing that you are willing to suffer for. A lot of times when people are in pursuit of their dreams, as you said, it isn't always linear, right? Sometimes you'll take some steps forward and then you'll take a couple steps, you know, backwards. But if you're willing to just have deep roots in that direction and be unwavering and maybe just, okay, if you have to pivot, you'll pivot this way and go with the flow. But I'm going to go through hook or crook till I
Yep.
get there. That's what you know you were put on this earth to do.
Well, your mother's a very smart lady, and she's 100% right about that.
Thank
You know, as I said, I think everybody starts out life with a dream, and they're usually big dreams. You know, you want to be an astronaut, you want to be a professional baseball player or something like that. And dreams tend to fade away as we go along. But I believe that everybody has that dream still inside of them, and they know it in their gut. They just know it. And like you said, if it's there and if you haven't given it a shot, you're going to regret it at some point. And I always say to people, you know, that old phrase, it's the journey, not the destination.
That's true.
If I didn't succeed at whatever level I've succeeded at, it wouldn't have been the end of the world for me. It was the fact that I gave it my best shot.
That's true.
And I think that's what we want to do in life. Give it our best shot.
I think it's hard for people to see that the
Yeah.
journey is a part of the process. Everyone wants to be
They want to get to the finish
at
line.
the other end
Yeah.
and be the successful
Yeah.
person that you're meant to be. Robert, you know, with us being a podcast discovery show, are you listening to podcasts yourself? Is there a podcast that you love, that you download every week and listen to that you could recommend to our audience?
Sure. I do listen to other podcasts, and I love what other people are doing. There was a podcast that had me on as a guest, and that's how I got introduced to the podcast. It's called Better Call Daddy, and it's by a lady that is a terrific interviewer, and she actually brings her father on at the end of each episode to see what his reaction was to that person that she just had on as a guest. So you kind of get double teamed at the end of the whole thing. But I think Rena Friedman Watts has this Better Call Daddy podcast, and I would highly recommend it.
That's
Awesome.
sweet. Better call Daddy. I'll take a
Well,
look.
great recommendation.
listen
And
to.
Robert, thank you so much for stopping by, hanging out with us, telling us a little bit about your podcast. And obviously, for anyone who wants to check out Follow Your Dreams, we'll make sure to put up a link on podsauce.com. This is Podsauce.